Tech Talk Show.
Thank you everyone for coming. Welcome to Tech Talk Show. This is a leadership program for second and third generation immigrants. And just welcome Dr. Clarence Lam. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you, everyone. Pleasure to be here with all of you, especially young folks. As a second-generation Asian American, it's always great to be able to inspire the next generation to come up behind us to take on these leadership roles. So it's an honor to be here. I want to thank Pastor Jung and Sun Media for the opportunity to speak to all of you. And hopefully we'll give you just a little bit of a preview of what I do in the legislature, what I do as a physician, and hopefully may be of interest to all of you and what you do later on as well. And so maybe just as a show of hands, who here is in high school? Anyone in high school? Anyone in college? A few others. I see some folks that are beyond college, so good to see everyone. All right, well, good to have the audience here. Always happy to talk to young folks too, because I also do a lot of teaching. And so it's always great to see kind of bright, smiling faces that are interested in some of the work that we do. So my name is Clarence Lam. I'm one of the state senators in the Maryland General Assembly. And I represent parts of Howard County and Anne Arundel County. So if you live in parts of Columbia, Elk Ridge, in Howard County, and then I also represent parts of northern Anne Arundel County, like Glen Burnie, Brooklyn Park, in that area. And so I live in Columbia, though, and have been there for the last couple years. But it's an interesting history here because I currently serve as the only Asian American in the state Senate. So out of 47 senators that represent different parts of the state of Maryland, only one Asian American, that's myself. I'm also the only physician in the state Senate. So there are not many people who have a healthcare background or a medical background serving in the Senate. And it's a really unique opportunity to be able to kind of highlight and spotlight some really important issues for our community and also for the medical community as well. And so a little bit about my background, how I got to here in Maryland. So my father was from Hong Kong. My mother is from Taiwan. They met here in the United States back in the 1970s. And I'm the oldest of three boys. And so growing up, I'm sure this was a lot for my parents with three boys. We were probably just always fighting and tearing apart the house. But being the oldest also gave me the opportunity to be able to kind of reflect on the experience of my family, and also recognize that my family and my siblings, my younger brothers, had a lot of opportunities here in the US that they wouldn't have had somewhere else. To be able to choose what they wanted to do, to be able to say what they wanted to say, to be able to participate in activities that were up to their choice. And that was, a reflection of the fact that here in the US, we have all of those opportunities. And so that's what got me inspired in politics and policy and in government, because I recognize that, at the foundational level, government and the policies that we put in place are really there to be able to help people, are really there to be able to help uplift families, help support them, help present opportunities, help educate kids. And there's just so much that we can do as a government to be able to support our community. And I recognized that and wanted to be able to give back, wanted to be able to support that. So when I was in high school, I took AP US History, really enjoyed it, decided, well, might as well take AP Government, and really enjoyed that as well. And so when I went to college at Case Western Reserve University out in Cleveland. And I was a double major in biology and political science. two very different areas, right? And so when I was in college, I was pre-med because Asian parents had pre-med. And so, but pre-med is not a major, right? And so you have to major in something. And I started as a chemistry major until I got to organic chemistry, and that basically killed that, idea. And so as a recovering chemistry major, I reached for biology because it was also the next kind of easiest thing. And so I was a biology major, but I also took a class in political science initially just to see what it was like. And in that class, the professor was the former ambassador to Yemen. And just a phenomenal teacher, someone who was an inspiring figure, and really got me interested in political science as well. And so I just took that one class thinking we'll see what this is like, and really enjoyed it. And so decided to also pursue the political science major. And that was okay because I still had the bio major. I was still pre-med. My parents were like, what are you going to do with the political science major? But you have a real major there, so you can still do something real afterwards. But really enjoyed kind of working both sides and could have gone two very different directions with that, right? With political science, you could have gone to law school. Obviously, with pre-med, you'd probably be going to med school. And so what brought me to Maryland was medical school. So I came to Maryland because I chose to come to University of Maryland for medical school. And that was in part recognizing that there are a lot of opportunities to work in health policy and public policy in the Maryland, D.C. area that you could still do as as someone who's here, whether in medical school or in other things that we'd be doing. And so that's what brought me to Maryland. And when I was here in Maryland, I took the opportunity as I was going through medical school to do an internship on Capitol Hill. And while I was at med school, I interned under Congressman Henry Waxman, who was a great public health champion. He was the one that had hearings on Capitol Hill on the relationship between smoking and lung cancer and how cigarettes were contributing to lung cancer. This was, back in the 90s. But then he was the chairman of a committee when I was there, serving as an intern. Just a phenomenal leader, someone who really was inspiring how you can really make a difference and make an impact in people's lives through the policies that we do, through hearings that you have, through regulations that you're able to put in place to protect the environment, to counter climate change, to be able to help make healthcare more accessible to people. And so I really took that to heart when I was there as a medical student and decided to specialize in preventive medicine. And so after medical school, you have to do something called residency. Residency can be anywhere from 3 to 7 years to specialize in a particular area of medicine. It can be family medicine, it could be pediatrics, it could be internal medicine, and those are usually 3 years. Some of the more complicated things like surgery, if you're going to be an orthopedic surgeon doing surgery on people's bones and spines, that's probably 5 or 6 years. If you're going to be a neurosurgeon cutting people's brains open, that's usually a 7-year residency. And so I did my residency in preventive medicine. Preventive medicine is a specialty of public health, and how you keep the health of a population well is what public health is all about. So rather than just treating the individual patient, so all of you had experiences seeing your own doctor, right, in a clinic or in the hospital where they're caring about what's just best for you individually. In public health, what we focus on is what's best for everyone in a community, right? And so we're oftentimes looking at things like reducing obesity in a community, right? How do we make medications more accessible and affordable for people? How do we, reduce rates of tuberculosis? Or how do we make sure that people don't injure themselves in falls or in accidents and end up in the hospital? So all of those are kind of public health things that we can do, which are a little bit different than what you do in the clinic. So I specialized in preventive medicine. I went to do my residency training at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. And then I stayed on as a faculty member there, and basically now train other resident physicians in my specialty of preventive medicine. But while I was there at Hopkins, I came across another faculty member who at the time was the only doctor in the Maryland General Assembly. So If you recall, you probably have all had some form of government. Congress is at the federal level. At the state level, we have something called the Maryland General Assembly. So that's like the state legislature, state Congress. And then at the local level, we have local government too. So there's like a county council, right? If you're in Anne Arundel County, there's an Anne Arundel County Council. Howard County has a Howard County Council. And so those are the different legislatures at the federal, state, and local level. When I was at Hopkins, this faculty member was the only physician in the entire state level General Assembly. And so I decided to serve on his staff to see what it's like to serve at the state level, because I had the opportunity earlier to work under Congressman Waxman at the federal level on Capitol Hill. Really enjoyed being able to serve at the state level, to serve someone who had that healthcare background, to be able to improve healthcare access across the state of Maryland. And so, decided to continue working on his staff and continue my faculty work at Hopkins. And in 2014, all of the delegates in my district decided to retire at the same time. So in Maryland, unlike other states, each district, and there are 47 districts across the state of Maryland, so Maryland's divided into 47 districts. Each district has 3 delegates and 1 senator. And so the 3 delegates in my district decided to retire at the same time back in 2014, creating 3 open seats. It was very unusual. And so I threw my hat into the ring to run for state delegate for the House of Delegates, which is the lower house in the Maryland General Assembly. And that was a recognition that, for many of us, we are underrepresented, right? We are underrepresented in business. We are underrepresented in politics. We're underrepresented in, a lot of other fields that are out there. And for us, if we didn't have people that would be willing to step up to run for office and serve in these positions, we're doing our community a disservice. It's important for us to step up to run if you have the time, the wherewithal, the means, and the interest to be able to do so. And particularly as a political science major, it really was that recognition that we can make a tremendous impact by serving in these roles to be able to help people. And so I ran in 2014. And when it comes to campaigning, which is a lot of work, it was a 1.5-year campaign of me just knocking on doors. So at the state and local level, the best way to be able to meet voters, to be able to talk to people, is knocking on their door. And you're usually knocking on doors that vote frequently, because you have a list of people that vote every single time during these elections that are coming up. And so you're knocking on certain people's doors. I ended up knocking personally on some 20,000 voters' doors. This was like a 1.5-year time, just every evening, every weekend, just knocking on doors, and got myself elected back in 2014 to serve in the Maryland House of Delegates. And then in 2018, my state senator in my district decided to retire. He'd been there for like 24 years. So you can tell that these seats don't open up very often. And so when he retired, decided to run for the state Senate seat and won that seat in 2018. And I've been serving in the state Senate since then. It's been an interesting time, to be able to serve in the Senate for the last 6 years and through a pandemic as the only physician and someone who has a background in public health. To be able to help influence and help make our state better when it comes to healthcare for all of you. It's also an interesting place as the only Asian American there in the state Senate, fighting for better protections for our Asian American community, fighting for interests that are important and priorities for our Asian American community. But it's important to carry that voice. And that's my message to all of you, that when it comes to finding what you want to do afterwards, because you're all currently in school or in training of some sort, just keep in mind that you want to find something that you're passionate about. Find something that really interests you. For me, it was policy. It was, working in politics. So even though, I was a pre-med and then became a physician, it was always the policy parts that always interested me a little bit more. And that's why, full circle, I still, do work as a physician. I still see patients every week, but still obviously involved in a lot of policy work and also in politics, because that was of interest to me. And so you have to find something that you're passionate about, because if it's not something that interests you, it's hard to stay motivated. It's hard to keep, putting time, effort, and talent into work that you do if you're not really, really interested in it. So you have to find something that you're passionate about, something that you're motivated and enthusiastic about. Number two, make sure you build relationships with other people. That I know it can be hard and it takes a lot of time. But, I think growing up, I always thought, things would be based on merit. Like, it's all about like how well you do on these exams and what you can show in terms of your knowledge and your skills. But I think these days, in particular with some of the hindsight and experience looking back, it's only a little bit about what you know. Merit, it doesn't get you to some of these leadership roles or to, a high level of success. It's who you know and how you build those relationships and how you make those connections and how you can help other people so that they can help you later on. Those relationships really matter. And I think that's one thing that, growing up, school never taught me, that I had to kind of figure out myself and on my own. But those relationships that you build, whether it's in college or afterwards, it's really who you know that will help advance you to those higher roles and those leadership roles, not necessarily what you know. We can all learn about different things. We can all read about it. We can all Google it. Now you have AI helping you out. Like, that will help with all the knowledge stuff. But the relationships you have to do on your own. You have to build those relationships on your own. So, kind of bear that in mind. I think when it comes to the work that you can do later on, I think it's important to make sure that you build the skills that you need to be successful later on. And do that now in high school and do that in college, because it's really important. I know growing up here, culturally, it was challenging. I grew up in parts of Pennsylvania that weren't even quite as diverse as here in Howard County or in Anne Arundel County. And so sometimes it was difficult to, pick up the skills that you need to be successful, to be able to build those relationships. So things like public speaking, obviously doing that now, I do a lot of public speaking. Growing up, I hated public speaking. Who here hates public speaking? Probably, most, okay, so most of the hands go up. As an Asian American growing up here in the US, hated public speaking also. When they asked me to public speak, I would usually be the one that would like memorize what I had to speak before the class. So when I'm up here, I can just regurgitate it back out, right? And that was me too, I hated it. But, I think it's important to kind of build up the skill set to be able to communicate well. Because at the end of the day, those relationships that you're making, those opportunities that you're trying to seek are all based on communication. Being able to sell yourself, to make a pitch, to be persuasive, to convince others that you're the right person for this job, or convince others that they should agree with you. That all comes back down to communication. And so it's important to kind of build that kind of a skill set so that you can be successful in whatever you do, because communications is going to be important regardless of whether your career is in medicine or in the environment or in technology or in engineering. You need the skill set to be able to communicate and to work with other people. So, I think that's also important. I think it's important for you to, as young people, to be inspired and find different role models in different areas that you are interested in. Because these careers are so different. We're in a changing society where AI can change things. We are in a changing society where there's a lot that you may know now that is just the beginning of a knowledge base of a field that's going to completely change by the time you're working in it. And so being able to kind of find other mentors that can kind of give you a pathway or an avenue to explore different things, to know what's coming down the pike in that particular field is really, really important. So, I think overall, there are a lot of opportunities here. And our Asian American community is the fastest growing community in the US. We are going to be successful, but we're still in the process of getting there. When you look at folks like myself in elected office, there are very few of us there, right? but all of you can be the next generation of leaders. It doesn't have to be in politics. It can be in business, right? There are also very few Asian Americans that are CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. Why is that? But we're going to get there. We're going to get there because it's your generation, generations behind us. They're going to be inspired. They're going to be motivated. They're going to learn these skills. They're going to be able to build on these experiences and break these glass ceilings to be able to serve in these roles, to be able to be just as successful as people that don't look like us, because we know that we can be in those roles as well. So encourage you to think about that, right? And to be comfortable in what you do and be confident of what you do. There are many times when I go into areas of my district that are not quite as diverse as here in Howard County, where when I walk into the room, I increase the diversity by 100%, because the room is mostly white folks that are in this room. But I'm their state senator, right? And they may never have been represented by someone who's Asian before, right? They're looking at you like, this guy is the guy that represents me in Annapolis. What does he know about me? I'm a white voter from Brooklyn Park in Glen Burnie, right? But you have to appear confident. You have to be confident in what you do, because people are very judgmental. And when they see someone like me coming into the room and I'm their senator and I represent them, if I look like I'm uncomfortable, they can sense that. You can usually tell when that person doesn't feel like they want to be there or they feel uncomfortable about that. For all of you, have that confidence because you belong there just like anyone else. You can do those roles just like anyone else can do those roles. And that's what I found has been important too, to be able to represent different parts of my district, some of which are not as diverse as here, to show them that, this Asian American senator, the only Asian American in the Maryland Senate, can represent them just like every other representative they've had who does not look like us, right? Who look like white representatives, which is fine. But I think it's very, it pushes them outside their comfort level a little bit to know that you have this person who's representing you. But that's also important because that helps other people outside of our community see us for who we are and how much we can contribute to the community regardless of our background, our race, our ethnicity. It's those types of experiences that help break those glass ceilings to be able to demonstrate to the broader public that we can do these jobs just like everyone else can. And just because you've never had an Asian senator before doesn't mean that we can't do it just as well as the folks before us. So be confident in what you do. And you may be the one breaking those glass ceilings as well in the future. So I hope this has been able to give a little bit of advice and a little bit of a preview of what I do and the work that I do both as a physician and also as a legislator. I'll close by talking about the physician part. So I specialize in preventive medicine, I mentioned. I still see patients every week. But we also know that in preventive medicine, the tools that you use are a little bit different. So when you are seeing a doctor, normally they would give you a prescription for a drug, or they would give you an order to have this x-ray done, or they would give you, or you would come in for surgery, right? They do some operation on someone. And that's what you would normally do in clinical medicine for most traditional doctors. In public health, our tools are a little bit different. We're trying to, reduce smoking in schools. We're trying to reduce obesity in the community. We're trying to make the air that you breathe healthier. And so the tools that we use as a physician who are specializing in public health are things like legislation and regulations and programs and services and funding and advocacy and communications and grants. Those are very different tools than we would use in the clinical environment in a doctor's office or in a hospital. But those tools align nicely with the tools that we otherwise use in the legislature, right? So legislation, regulations, programs, funding, communications, advocacy, grants, all of those dollars are things that we also do in the state legislature. And so, I'm able to bring all of that together and really enjoy the job that I do because as a public health physician, the tools that we utilize as a legislator and as a physician align really, really well. And that's why, as I said at the beginning, find something that you're passionate about. Find something that you really enjoy doing. because the world is a crazy place right now. Life is not long enough, right? And you don't want to spend time doing things that you're not interested in doing. You have to find something you're passionate, enthusiastic about. And when you do, you'll enjoy doing it a lot more, right? And so listen to yourself, listen to your heart, and what makes you motivated and interested to do things that you choose to do, and make that your career. There's so many opportunities out there. The world is really just full of experiences and opportunities that can be new, that'll fit whatever you want to do. You just have to find it. And so you can tell that I've done many things over my career. And I've always taken to heart a piece of advice, which is try to say yes to everything. Like if it really doesn't fit, then decline and say no. But try to keep an open mind about the different things that you can do. Because there's so many different opportunities that I would have closed off if I just had a closed mind and said, no, I don't want to do that, I don't want to do that, I don't want to do that, I don't want to do that. Particularly as you're new in your career, as you're coming out of training, coming out of education, try to say yes to as many things as you can. See what is out there, see what you like. You'll never know until you actually give it a try. And if it's not your thing, great. Then just say, thanks, I gave it a shot, it's not my thing, I'm gonna try something else. But start from yes, because if you start from no, you're closing off a lot of doors, and a lot of things that you may never experience, that you may not even ever know. So I hope that's helpful. Really appreciate the time to be able to be here this afternoon to others. But thank you so much.
What's a piece of advice would you wish someone gave you back in middle school or high school?
I guess getting to know people in different environments, right? That, I kind of mentioned earlier that it's really about who you know, right? And I guess a piece of advice would be to not just to get out of the house and just do things. That you're not going to be successful just by sitting at home, right? Whether it's, in medicine, or in politics, or in business, or in academia, you have to get out and talk to people. And so that takes time. All of us would rather just be sitting at home watching TV, playing video games, sitting on the computer, checking out your phone. But you're not actually going to build those real relationships. They're going to get you somewhere by sitting at home. And so, as an elected official, I'm on the road a lot, at a lot of different things. And sometimes, there are times where you just want to sit at home and just veg out, just tired. But you get up and you get out because you realize that sitting at home is not going to get you anything. It's talking to people, it's hearing from folks, it's listening to people's stories, learning from them, being able to communicate that back to others. Those are the relationships that you're able to build, but you can only do that by getting outside of your house and getting outside of your comfort zone a little bit. And so, if I were to think back to, high school and college, that's the advice I would give too, that now just in hindsight that probably a lot of lost opportunities that you could have learned more, had more experiences, build up more skill sets. But oftentimes you're do I really want to go out and do this activity? Rather just kind of stay back and sit at home, right? But push yourself. That's really important to be able to kind of put yourself out there, push yourself outside the comfort zone so that you can hear from other people. Because it's like I said earlier, those relationships are the ones that are going to matter.
How can young people make a difference in their community right now?
I think young people can make a huge difference because of two reasons. One, you bring a new perspective. I think we're in a day and age where everything is being disrupted. Sometimes good, sometimes bad. But I think young folks bring a new perspective that we need. And you're the ones going to be shaping the future later on. And so we have to pay attention to your perspectives. Number two, I think a lot of the the older folks, the upper generations, have messed up a lot of things, right? Whether it's, the environment that we're facing a huge climate crisis, whether it's, AI and we haven't figured out what to do about it and guardrails that need to be in place, whether it's wars that are going around the world that, we haven't figured out how to solve and how to bring peace to. It's the younger generation that's going to figure out all of these problems, right? You listen to the news, if you're paying attention to things, the world seems like it's on fire. Everything seems messed up. Things are upside down. Everything's chaotic, right? Those of us in our generation have completely messed a lot of things up. But it's you guys that are going to be the solutions to help figure it out, right? And so, just think about that. The perspectives that you bring are important. You're going to think about problems differently than we are. You're going to come up with solutions that we've never thought about. We're going to depend on you to fix the messes that are going on right now because, I think for many of us, these challenges that we're facing are societal challenges, and we're going to depend on young people in the next generation to help fix this. Sometimes, with folks in my generation, older, people are pretty entrenched in their ways. It's hard to break through some of this, but there's still a lot of hope for the younger generation like yourself to help fix the problems that we're facing across the nation, across the world.
Who was your most important mentor in your life?
It's a good question. I think some of the most important mentors, I'll pick two because I work in some very different areas. So one of my mentors was the former dean of the School of Public Health at Johns Hopkins. He was a phenomenal leader. He was the person that was credited with eradicating smallpox. And you probably never heard of smallpox because smallpox is the only disease that's ever been eradicated from the face of the earth, right? So a huge effort and undertaking back in the 60s and 70s and 80s. Those who are older here will remember smallpox. But, he was one who led the program for the World Health Organization to eradicate this disease, this virus. Tremendous success, great accomplishment. And he was a phenomenal leader who showed me how much we can do as physicians by focusing on public health. It's important, and that's why I still see patients every week to do the one-on-one care. You've probably seen your doctor, and that's the one-on-one clinical care that we do. But he opened my eyes to how much we can do from a public health perspective, not just for that individual person, which is really important when you're seeing your doctor one-on-one, but also the health that you can change across a community or a state or the nation or around the world by working in public health. Number two, I would say one of my mentors, and I mentioned him earlier, was at the time the only physician in the Maryland General Assembly. His name was Dan Morheim, and just learned a lot from him on how a physician serving in a legislative body like the General Assembly could make a difference in some of the laws that we passed, and was really inspired by that work. And that's why, when I've been serving legislature, I focus on a lot of healthcare-related bills. I passed a bill that was called the Healthy Babies Equity Act a couple years ago that allowed the state to cover prenatal care for mothers throughout their entire pregnancy, because there were still pregnant women at the time who could not get health insurance. And we know how important those prenatal visits are, to have a ultrasound done, to have testing done and screening done for the mom and the baby while they're still developing. And then it also covered healthcare for the baby for at least a year after the birth, and also for the mother, which was really important. And through that program, we got probably about 8,000 to 10,000 moms and their children now who otherwise would not have had health insurance to now have health coverage for prenatal care and postnatal care in just the last 3 or 4 years. And so it's impacts like that you can really make, that you recognize, wow, this can make a huge impact in people's lives, that inspired me to go into the legislature as well. But I credit my mentor, Dan Morheim, for showing me the type of work that we do as a legislature and the impact that it can have particularly bringing the physician and healthcare kind of perspective to things. That there are very few, as you can tell, there are very few doctors and people that have a science background serving in the legislature. But by being able to bring that perspective, you can really make an impact on the laws that the state passes and on people's lives.
When you were our age, did you imagine doing the work you're doing now?
No, I did not. I think, growing up, never thought I'd be serving elected office. Number one, I hated public speaking. Number two, this is not what my parents wanted me to do, So no, I never thought that. And even when I was going through as a political science major and even having interned on Capitol Hill and served on the staff in the Maryland General Assembly, never thought I would be the one in elected office. Because getting elected is tough. I got elected in a district that is not majority Asian. There's a decent number of Asians here in Howard County. Most of them don't live in my district. And then Anne Arundel County is not quite as diverse. And so I had this kind of mantra that was selected, never elected. And this is kind of very Asianly, perspective that you're selected because you're selected based on merit. Elected, to get elected, you're throwing it out there to random people like yourself, to decide, oh, this person's a good person to vote for. That's tough because, my district is not mostly Asian. People don't look like me in my district. And so I have to convince people that look very different than me to vote for me out of these other 10 candidates when I was first running. And that was hard, And so I had this mindset that selected, never elected, because I never thought I'd be running for office and having to go through all that. Running for office is the worst job application process in the world, right? When you're applying for a job, you're trying to convince one person that or maybe two people that, oh, they should hire you. When you're running for office, you're trying to convince 10,000 people that you barely met, most of whom you've not met, most of them who don't know anything about you, and that you're the right person for the job, right? And some of you have voted, but when you go to vote, you'll go into the polling booth, you'll see a bunch of names, and you're like, I don't know who these people are. I don't recognize these names. And so, how people will vote is oh, I'm Italian, that name sounds Italian, all right, I'll check that name off. Or, I'm a woman, I'll check off all the women, or that person's name I don't like, this person's name sounds pretty cool, I'll check that guy's name, right? So, this is how people vote, right? So, running for office is the absolute worst job application process in the world. But it's important, right? It's important to get good people to serve. So, to answer your question, no, I never thought I would want to go through all that, but was motivated through all those mentors and those experiences I mentioned to be willing to step up, to run, and to serve. Because if we don't have people who look like us serving, we're doing our community a disservice. And we oftentimes then won't have a seat at the table for someone who understands our culture, understands our heritage, understands our background, understands some of the challenges that our Asian American community goes through, whether it's here in Howard County or in Anne Arundel County or other areas of the state, to be able to have a seat at that table and voice that concern to other people, right? And so that's why I was willing to step up, even though growing up, no, this is absolutely not what I thought I'd be doing.
So back to the last question, you say you never thought you would be like this today. So I believe that you must have a lot of choice and a lot of advice during that day. So what made you decided, oh, this is what I want to do, I want to be? So what made you like this?
Yeah. I mean, I think it was, I really go back to, and most of you are second generation here. It was really that second generation perspective of, we're really fortunate to be here, right? You look at all the crises and fires around the world, even though things look very chaotic here right now, there are places that could be worse off, right? You could be in places that are worse off. And we're fortunate here. But we're only fortunate here because people have been willing to step up into these roles to either advocate for you, to fight back, to stand up for your rights. And if we don't have someone who's willing to do that, and I had the time, had the wherewithal, the means to be able to spend a year and a half just knocking on 20,000 voters' doors, if you had all of those and the skills and the interest, most folks are not interested in doing that. They'd rather be spending their time doing something else. But if you had the skills, the times, the interests, the wherewithal, the means to be able to step up and to run for office, would you be doing your community a disservice to not do that, right? And so that's in part a recognition that, like, let's give it a shot, let's give it a go. You know, at least run once to see how it goes. I was fortunate that I won, but you know, I think it's hard, right? It's hard to serve in these offices and these roles, but we need people like yourself or people that look like me to be able to step up and serve in these roles. Because if you're not in the room, then you're not there when the decisions are being made, and that means that we're oftentimes forgotten about. We're left off the menu. We're left off the table, right? They forget about, you know, what our community needs, and that's really tough. So even though, you know, I represent parts of Howard and Anne Arundel counties, I have a lot of people from across the state reach out that are Asian American, because as the only Asian American in the Senate, they're looking for a familiar face. They're looking for someone that understands their culture or their heritage or what they had to go through when they were growing up here. And so I try to help them out even though they're not my constituents, because I think it's important to be able to stand up for our community. That, like, even though you can't vote for me if you live outside my district, that doesn't mean that I shouldn't help you, especially if you're Asian American, because you have no other voice in the state Senate. A lot of folks turn to me. You know, I'll say this, and happy to take any more questions, but like, I think the, just kind of as a closing kind of thought here, like, democracy is really messy, right? We see that right now. Like, it seems like everything's a mess. You know, everyone's just fighting over things. We can't even keep the government open. You know, it seems like crazy out there, right? And we see policies being pulled back, people's rights being taken away, healthcare being ripped out of people being shipped off with no time in court. It's crazy right now. But democracy is very messy, right? Democracy depends on people fighting back and forth a little bit, right? And playing tug of war. Democracy is not an easy thing. You know, there's a saying that Winston Churchill put out before, that democracy is the worst form of government, except for all other forms of government. Think about that. Like, democracy is the worst form of government, except for every other form of government. Every other form of government's worse, and oftentimes have failed. Democracy is not pretty. And that's what's also challenging for us culturally. Like, democracy depends on this tension of, you know, somebody wanting to do this, and then the other folks wanting to do that, and then somebody wanting to do this, and we're going to go this way, right? And so that's why we always feel like we're zigzagging back and forth when it comes to democracy. But that fight is also tough for why many of us don't want to serve in office. Many of us from the Asian American community don't want to serve in office because we're not ones that want to always go out there just constantly fighting about things. You know, culturally, we're much more reserved and much more private. Like, if we have concerns, we try to deal with it in our families. We try to work with our immediate, like, you know, neighbors to try to solve an issue. We're not ones to go out there and try to, you know, pound the pavement and fight about things. But here, you know, to be successful, you have to be willing to speak up, right? You have to have those relationships, and you have to advocate hard for yourself. And that's not a natural skill for us. That's not a natural skill that I had growing up. I've had to build that up. And the success that we have will depend on us having to be able to fight as well, you know, and pull back and forth in this democracy to be able to help continue to make progress. Democracy is not always linear. Sometimes it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Sometimes it's 3 steps forward, and right now we're probably taking 100 steps back. But in general, democracy will move forward and will move upward, right? And progress will continue to be made. It's just not always linear and straight, you know? And so that quote from Winston Churchill is important. And then I'll close on this other quote from Ben Franklin, who said that it is the first responsibility of every citizen to question authority. Think about that. Democracy depends on people questioning authority. It depends on that tension back and forth of people pulling. I want to go this way. You want to go that way. You want to go this way. You want to go that way. Ben Franklin said that because it depends on all of you to be able to speak up on your opinion, your voice, to pull things in certain directions, the way you want to see it go. Because that's what democracy depends on. That's why he said the first responsibility of every citizen is to question authority, question us, what we're doing. We depend on that.
With how stressful your work is, how do you keep motivated or how do you stay focused?
I have a high tolerance for stress. Don't sleep very much. Medical school has taught me to not sleep very much too. I think this is where I go back to, you have to find something you're passionate about. In this role, you have to be able to be willing to deal with a lot of stress. You have to be able to recognize that not everyone's going to be happy at you, that you only need to keep 50% plus one person happy to be able to stay in this role. That at any point in time, there's going to be probably 20 or 30% that probably hate you and what you're doing. And you have to be okay with it, right, in this role. That's not for everyone, right? Most people don't like the fact that 30% are going to hate you and what you do, right? And if that's the case, don't choose this role. Do something else that you feel passionate about, that you're interested in. But I think for how do you deal with a lot of the stress in this role, I think you just have to keep in mind the greater good that you're doing. That this tug of war that I mentioned, that you're just fighting back and forth, they want to pull this direction, you want to pull the other direction. You have to understand and recognize that you're working and you're pulling and you're advocating for the greater good to be able to change people's lives, right? Like that Healthy Babies Equity Act that I mentioned. I'll never know those 8,000 women and babies that benefited from the Healthy Babies Equity Act that we passed to be able to make sure that they have prenatal care and postnatal care. But it's incredibly rewarding to know that you had that impact on people's lives, even people that you've never met, that you've never known. And so, I think that's what keeps me motivated. And it's a similar, motivation to be a physician, right? Physicians, they work hard, long hours, they're on call, they get pulled into the hospital and the clinic, but they feel like they're actually making a difference in people's lives. And there's nothing more important to an individual than their health. And if you feel like you can help improve somebody's health to get better, you feel like you've really made an impact. And it's the same sense of satisfaction and reward that you have as being a physician that you can also carry with you as being a legislator. And that, I think, helps motivate and reduce some of the frustration and the stress that you would otherwise deal with in these positions. All right. Well, thank you. We appreciate the time. Thank you. I want to thank Sun Media, thank the pastor, thank Judge Pak for helping set all of this up and arrange things as well. It's good to see all of you. I'm happy to hang around to answer any other questions.
Yes, just give us one moment. Well, thank you again for coming out.
Of course.
On behalf of Sun Media, this is just a small gift for you, for being an innovator, a trailblazer, just like Thomas Edison.
All right,
so thank you very much.
Very appropriate. So, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
Dr. Lam.
Thank you.
Would you rather be called doctor or politician?
Oh, Father. I think most of us would prefer to be called public servants. I think we're here to serve the public. But it's hard because people have said when you run for office and you get elected, whether you're elected as a delegate or a senator, you lose your other title. People don't think of you as a physician anymore. And so, that's why I still see patients every week, to be able to still have that connection directly with people. But, when it comes to the title, public servant is we're here to serve all of you. So that would be perfectly fine. So thank you.
All right, let us pray for Dr. Clarence Lam.
사랑의 하나님,
Loving God,
오늘 우리 가운데 클래렌스 램 형제를 보내주셔서 지혜와 경험을 나누게 하시니 너무나 감사합니다.
thank you for sending our brother Clarence Lam to us today and allowing us to hear and share in his wisdom and experience.
나눈 이야기 속에 우리 각자의 삶을 돌아보게 하시고
Through the stories and insights we heard,
또 새 용기와 소망을 얻게 하여 주시옵소서.
grant us renewed courage and hope.
그가 어떤 자리에 있든 공의와 사랑과 겸손의 길을 걸어가게 하시고
And wherever he is placed, may he be used as a true servant who loves justice
참된 일꾼으로 쓰임받게 하여 주시옵소서.
and walks humbly before you.
우리의 교회를 통해서 다음 세대와 열방에 세워지는 하나님의 뜻이 이루어지게 하여 주시옵소서.
And let your will be done through our church as we build the next generation and reach the nations.
예수님의 이름으로
In Jesus' name we
기도하옵나이다.
pray.
아멘.
Amen.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.